Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today, my guest is Steve Miller. He writes an international syndicated column on organized crime and political corruption for Rick Perillo's AmericanMafia.com. Now, Steve has played a real part in the Las Vegas scene as well. He's a former Las Vegas City Councilman, former Clark County Regional Transportation Commissioner, and a series of other things. Now, I want to welcome to my show Steve Miller.
Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure.
A pleasure is mine as well. Now, Steve, when we talk about political corruption, I want you to tell some of your stories about what you experienced, because political corruption is a phenomena that seems to be even growing more and more. What do you have to tell our audience about this particular situation?
Well, not only have I been in office, but I've been on both sides of the fence. I've been a reporter, a commentator, a talk radio show host here in Southern Nevada for over 40 years. And in those years, prior to being elected, I reported on a lot of the activities of individuals who later became my colleagues on various boards and bodies that I served on here. And in one instance, a name kept popping up, a fellow who I had actually gone to high school with by the name of Jerry, or at that time his name was Jerry Schaefer. Later we learned his legal name is Jared E. Schaefer, who had been appointed the Clark County, that's our county, public guardian by another friend of mine, Manny Cortez, the father of the former Nevada Attorney General Catherine Cortez Mastow. Now, when Manny Cortez, as the chairman of the Clark County Commission, appointed his friend Jared Schaefer to be the first public guardian, it set into motion a series of events that later possibly cost thousands of senior citizens their life savings and their heirs, their inheritances. And I think that this particular act or scam that I believe my former high school mate Schaefer perpetrated upon many of our seniors in this area has spread throughout the nation. I think it was the model. I think it started here, and what we call it is guardianship abuse.
Yeah. Now, Steve, when we talk about guardian abuse, this is not something that is very new. Many people understand really that the people who are like octogenarians are very vulnerable to this type of crime. Now, if you were working on this particular thing again, would you change the way you did it?
Well, no, I would simply try to be louder and scream from rooftops to people outside of certain of our Sun Belt retirement communities to please not move into one of these meccas that people are enticed to move to during their golden years through very expensive campaigns, advertising campaigns, including mailers that people will receive in the mail, especially in cold climate areas, to move south, to move to Sun City, to move to Orlando, to move to Las Vegas, Phoenix, various places where rich people who generally have worked all their lives and now it's their time to relax, are enticed to move. And once they move there, they can and often become the marks, the targets of predatory guardians and or the courts and the attorneys who support them. It only happens to wealthy people.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you something. We are dealing with a new technology. You know, everything is on the computer, everything is on the iPhone, the iPad, and it's very, very easy for a lot of these criminals to hack these things, to take advantage of people who they see on Facebook and various other places. Now, how do you control that? I mean, you're dealing with the computer, and even I remember a time when you heard that Oprah, of all people, was hacked, and they took money out of her bank. So you're dealing with a computer, a technology society. So what do you say to that?
Well, I'm not sure if the Guardians, who M. Larson has written about in his book Guardianship, are doing this. If they are, then it's that much easier to find out just how wealthy their next mark will be, because it's not that hard to go through the records, say, of the realtors who sell the expensive homes on golf courses to wealthy retirees in Sunbelt cities in these types of communities that are set up for elderly people to retire, to find out if the people are wealthy, if they have bank accounts, if they learn this either through computers or through spies or others who may be in cahoots with the guardians and the family courts who assign them. They could find out that someone has $1 million in liquid assets, or that their home is paid for, that is on the golf course. And that person or couple, it's always a married couple to begin with, become the subjects of this fraud. And thereafter, when one dies, and that's inevitable, sadly to say, somebody is going to die. The other spouse is left in a position where they could be put under guardianship by a family court judge in their city without even knowing it. And once the guardian has stepped in, the old B-movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers comes to mind. The guardian becomes the elderly person. He becomes their guardian, or she becomes their guardian, and that person, under power of attorney, that guardian is able to steal everything. And we have thousands of cases here in southern Nevada where that's occurred, and we're learning it's happening throughout the country.
Right. Now, understanding that this is happening, if you had an opportunity to make a change, to institute a new law, talk to our government, a local congressman, is there anything that you would say to them that would get them moving in the right direction so that they can change this horror that's going on?
I would probably look for some kind of way that judges who are in cahoots with the private guardians who they assign to their wards, they call them wards, which is a terrible name for a person who's destitute, meaning they're alone but wealthy, and that the ward then is taken advantage of with full power of attorney and with complete cooperation of a family court judge. I wish we could punish the family court judges. We have two of them here in southern Nevada who stand out. One is John Norheim, the other is Chuck Hoskin, who sign off on every request that comes onto their desk by a private guardian to completely bilk the estate of the ward the guardian had been assigned to by Judge Hoskin or Judge Norheim. They don't seem to care. Either they're sharing in it or they're stupid, but they keep signing it off. And we have no recourse legally against the judges because the guardians are doing this under color of law. Everything that I have written about, or that M. Larson writes about in his book Guardianship, is legal. And that is the problem. How in the world can these judges get away with it with nothing to stop them?
Yeah. Now, Steve, since you're aware that these judges are doing all these horrible things and getting away with it, how come people on the top, and when I talk about the top, I'm talking about some of the legislators in Las Vegas, or not only the legislators, the governor of Nevada. Now, wouldn't they, if they knew more about it and you made them aware, wouldn't they do something about it?
Well, at this point they are. Thank goodness. We have a political race taking place here in the state for the vacated U.S. Senate seat of Harry Reid, which means that we right now are in the spotlight nationally, and that one of the persons who's running for that office, Catherine Cortez Masto, the former Nevada Attorney General, whose father appointed Jared Schaefer to become the first public guardian, is now being blasted with millions and millions of dollars of TV ads saying that she allowed the exploitation of senior citizens by guardians who were friends of her father. And this ad is on every 5 seconds, it seems, on our channels throughout the state of Nevada. So here in Nevada, it seems like everybody in public office now is stepping on board the bandwagon saying, hey, wait a minute, there's a problem. Retirement is Nevada and many other states either top or second most lucrative industry, and we don't want to mess with it. We're going to stop the retirees from coming here and buying expensive homes, then gambling or whatever else they do. And that's going to happen if we don't stop it. So it seems like governors and our new attorney general who replaced Mastow and the district attorney and various police departments are on top of it now, and I'm thrilled about that, at least here in Nevada, but I wish it could happen in other states. It's finally become a major issue, at least here in Nevada. It needs to surface in other states, and unfortunately it doesn't because we're dealing with elderly people. It's not a sexy subject. Oftentimes the witnesses are dead before you can get them into court. So I'm saying that, yeah, we're going to get it fixed here in Nevada, but I really am concerned about other states where it is beginning. We've had 35 years of it. It's just starting to surface in other states.
Okay, so Steve, now you talked about this book that was written by somebody else. Now, if you had a chance to write a book, what would you say in it? Because, again, Las Vegas is doing something about this, but you just admitted and you revealed the fact that there are other states where this might take place, and it really will be a horrible, horrible thing. So give me like a scenario, if you would, of if you were to start a book, what would you put in the introduction?
Well, in the book Guardianship by M. Larson, which is available on Amazon, I am quoted throughout there. So I'm very glad that Mr. Larson decided to use a lot of my articles that I've written since 1999 in either local newspapers here, the Las Vegas Tribune, and then later on AmericanMafia.com. So I'm throughout the book, Guardianship by M. Larson. So I would say that I'm speaking loudly in that book. And I've told some stories, and I think to go and use one or two of them as an analogy is good because they're for the sake of God go you or I when it comes to being retired. I can give you one of those stories that at this time is kind of ringing true in Las Vegas.
Okay, let it go. Tell us more about it.
It was in 1999. This is the actual start for me because I don't have a pony in this race. My parents have they're deceased. If this would have happened to them, I probably would be in prison for first-degree murder of the guardian, but it didn't with my family, thank goodness. But back in 1999, a friend of mine contacted me, and he was absolutely beside himself. He says, they kidnapped my mom. We've been living, and I knew the mom. She was a lovely woman, very wealthy. And her son called me, and he says, she's been taken out of the house. She has Alzheimer's. She's been put into a rest home, and I had nothing to say about it. So he says, and she's been brutally beaten. He says, and I would like you and a very good friend of mine who is a recently retired FBI special agent as witnesses. So would you go with me and the special agent retired to see her and photograph her and then go to court and tell the judge what happened? I said, well, if you need a witness, I guess I'm a legitimate witness. Well, myself along with Special Agent Retired Gunderson went to this rest home, and sure enough, Mrs. Gull, her name was Anna Marie Gull, had been brutally beaten. Her face was all swollen. She had bruises throughout her body. We photographed her, and to the dismay of the owner of the rest home who wanted us to leave, when we wouldn't leave. They would have had to call the police to have us leave till we had concluded our investigation. I took those photographs to the courtroom several days later, and the judge refused to enter them into evidence or to accept my testimony or that of the former special agent. And when I saw that, and the judge was William Voy, V-O-Y, he's still on the Clark County Family Court, and he's also a commissioner on the Supreme Court for the state of Nevada, put together a Guardianship Commission. He doesn't belong there. But he was the judge who said, no, I'm not going to turn this into a media circus, and he wouldn't allow my testimony, the photographs to be entered into evidence, or Special Agent Gunderson's testimony. So Mrs. Gall was the one who was punished even more so than her son. She was moved out of the county to another rest home controlled by Jared Schaefer. And she died shortly thereafter at that rest home. So that was my beginning. And I said, okay, I'm going to watch Jared Schaefer and I'm going to watch Judge Boy and other judges here in our family court system to see if this continues. And lo and behold, it comes back into onto my desk in 2013 in the case of Guadalupe Olvera, a millionaire, who he and his wife bought a beautiful home on the hill overlooking the Las Vegas Strip, and it was taken for almost everything he owned after his wife's death by, again, Jared Schaefer. So I began writing about Mr. Olvera, a World War II hero. He was 90 years old when he began being bilked. And his case finally was resolved by a California Superior Court judge who terminated Schaefer's guardianship, the first time that ever had occurred. But by that point in time, Schaefer had depleted Mr. Olvera's bank account, his trust of over $435,000. I believe that Schaefer had his eye on Mr. Olvera's hillside home, possibly to take it away and possibly even move there himself. It was to the point where when I began writing the stories about Mr. Olvera on AmericanMafia.com, I realized that he was being held captive in this mansion by Schaefer.
What? To
the extent that Mr. Olvera's daughter and son-in-law finally, upon Mr. Olvera's orders, and he's an old soldier accustomed to giving orders, he said, "Get me out of here." And the family came from Santa Cruz, California, and they took him back to Santa Cruz, where he had lived all his life with his wife prior to her death, and his move to Sun City here in southern Nevada, big mistake. And he lived another 5 years. I believe that had Mr. Olvera stayed in his mansion on the hill in Las Vegas with no friends or family, he would have died shortly thereafter. And I think that Jared Schaefer would have taken possession of his home as he had taken possession of everything else.
What a tragedy. What a travesty as well. Now, it's interesting that you say something that it's called Sun City. Now, when you think about the word Sun City, you think of light, you think of brightness, you think of all kinds of beautiful things. But boy, what an irony, huh?
Well, there's more than just Sun City is the irony. The names of the guardians. Okay, I mentioned Mr. Schaefer, Jared E. Schaefer, but working for him was a woman named Patience Bristol, who's now in prison for elder abuse and exploitation. Another one who he trained skipped town recently. Her name was April Parks. I'm almost thinking these are fake names. I mean, your wife dies, your husband dies, and a very attractive lady comes to your door. "Hi, I'm April Parks. I'm here to help you." Or, "Hi, I'm Patience Bristol. I'm here to help you." The elderly gentleman or the elderly lady, the widower or widow, looks at them and says, "Well, why not? Let this person come in and look around and help to, clean the house and, take over my financial problems or duties, because my mind is so distracted in grief for my loss of my spouse that it's nice to have an April or a Patience here in my home to help me." And the next thing you know, April or Patience or Jared becomes you legally and takes everything you own. And your family is screaming from over state lines saying, "What is going on here?" And some judge, the same judge as I mentioned, will rule in the court when the family petitions to get rid of the Aprils and the Jareds and the Patiences, that you, as the family member, are unfit, and you cannot be the fiduciary over your family member, your loved one.
Hold on, Steve. How do they prove, or how do they say somebody's unfit? It doesn't seem logical.
No. Well, if the judge says so, you're unfit, period. That's how I found it to be. And the people that they've said that are unfit, in the case of Mrs. Gall's son, had taken a course on how to care for his mom during her final years as an Alzheimer's patient. He had a certificate given him or that he earned after $1,500 spent in a course so that he could care for his mom, and they found him unfit. In another instance, a CEO of a Fortune 500 company was found unfit. And others, like Mrs. Schultz, who came and took her dad out of his guardianship here in southern Nevada, Mr. Olvera, Mrs. Schultz was found to be unfit. Everyone's unfit, according to the judge, because the guardian needs to have more time to build the estate.
What about the HIPAA laws? I mean, don't they apply?
I'm not sure. I can't answer that.
Well, this is something that I think it would be great for you to look into, because I know that HIPAA makes it very difficult for people who are not the sons, the daughters, people who are part of the major family. They won't give you any kind of information. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad, because sometimes people only have friends, or they have just a couple of people whom they know, and if they're not their legal guardian, they won't give you any of the information. But let's continue just for a minute. So you write for, you're a syndicated columnist, and you write for Rick Perello's AmericanMafia.com. Now, if you had a chance to write this for the Wall Street Journal or for the New York Times, would they want to pick up this story? What do you think?
Well, I've been interviewed by CBS 60 Minutes on this subject, and then they canceled the airing of it because their attorneys at CBS came back and concluded that everything that I am describing is legal. It's legal to do this to people in the state of Nevada because judges sign off on all requests that are made to them by the guardians that are assigned to the wards, they call them. And once a judge signs something off, it becomes legal, even if the law states, which is, the law is very clear here in the state, that a guardian cannot maintain guardianship after the person is deceased, for instance, for longer than 6 months. They can settle the affairs. But we have one instance here of a woman worth several hundred millions of dollars whose father built what's called Piccoli Ranch, consisting of about 10,000 homes here in the Las Vegas Valley. His daughter was under guardianship until she passed away in 2008. And in 2013, when I wrote my story called Grave Robbery Under Color of Law, Leanne Piccoli was still alive, according to the Clark County Family Court. And the first thing I did on my story in American Mafia about Leanne Piccoli was put a picture of her gravestone. But according to the records, which I also linked to in my story, it states that she's still alive and that Jared Schaefer is her guardian. And that Schaefer, during the period of time, the first year that after Leanne's death in 2008, Schaefer paid himself over $400,000 from her estate for his services as guardian.
Unbelievable.
And how many years later, 2013, the mansion that she owned, also on the hill overlooking the Strip, was in Mr. Schaefer's name, and that he was still receiving the proceeds from her bank accounts, the interest, the annuities, all of the things, and he may still be receiving that. And the judge, that being in Miss Piccoli's event, it was Judge Norheim, keeps signing it off every year like she's still alive, and no one can stop him.
Okay, so hold on a minute. You mentioned your former Senator Reid. Now, he was in the Senate for a very long time, and supposedly Las Vegas was his passion. I mean, he loved Las Vegas a lot. But he got so many things passed in the Senate. For example, they were going to build a train from Las Vegas all the way into Los Angeles, and many, many other things. Now, did he know about this?
He may or may not have. If he's reading the Las Vegas Review-Journal, the state's largest newspaper, which I'm sure he does, he's read about Mr. Olvera's case on the front page several times. If he watches Channel 13, which is our ABC affiliate, he's heard about all of these other cases, Rudy and Rennie North, or Elizabeth Endig, or others that were being built by our local private guardians. It's a big story here, so Harry Reid has to know about it unless he's out to lunch. But I think he knows, and he's done nothing.
He's done nothing. So if there is anybody whom you can go to and make them aware. Not so much in Las Vegas, because it sounds like you have a handle on it, but if anybody in other states, I mean, let's talk about Florida. I'm in Florida, and of course a lot of the people who live here are elderly. What would you do? What would you say? How would you get them to really put their minds on this issue and deal with it? What would you say?
Okay, I don't care what state it's in. There are elder abuse, elder exploitation laws on the books. It's state law. It's under the jurisdiction of the state attorney general's office. So you can go to the state attorney general, and if they're not shirking their responsibility, if you report to them any of the instances of elder abuse or elder exploitation by court-appointed private guardians, it is their duty to investigate and to prosecute. Now, if they don't want to, which was the case with Cortez Mastow, who is running now for Reid's seat, Catherine Cortez Mastow, she refused, and I think it had something to do with her dad's friendship with Jared Schaefer. So we went down a step, and we went to the district attorney, and he jumped on it. Our district attorney is hot to trot to make sure that he prosecutes some of these horrible private guardians. So we're happy that that's occurring. The police department also, they have an abuse and neglect detail here, and I'm saying there probably is also in other cities in Florida and elsewhere. They should immediately respond to complaints from either family members, neighbors, or the actual person being exploited. In many cases, the individuals who are being exploited, who have been called crazies or whatever by the court and the guardians and have never been heard from, basically, they're not treated with any respect. They should be able to make a complaint. In the case of Mr. Olvera, he was very lucid, very intelligent, and he made complaints. And in the case of Rudy and Rennie North here in Las Vegas, they made complaints. They were finally listened to, and they were able to testify before the Nevada Supreme Court Guardianship Commission. And when I heard that, I realized these people don't need guardians. They're smarter than any guardian I ever read or saw.
Right. So, Steve, it sounds like you've really made a dent in the law. You've really created a situation that has some of these, I keep on saying horrible people for lack of any other word, but you've had an influence on making changes. And I think this could be a movie, it could be a show, it could be a book. Did you ever think that maybe a movie is in your is possible for you? Because movies reach thousands upon thousands of people. So if have you ever tried, have you spoken to any producers, any executive producers to see whether they would cover something like this?
Well, I just don't know any, so I haven't. I mean, if somebody were interested, I'd be happy to be the librarian. I've got all of these stories, and in fact, in the book Guardianship by M. Larson, and a number of my stories have been reproduced with my permission. So I'm glad to work with anyone on that subject because we're just trying to get the word out. The main thing is it's just simply to get the word out because, like I say, if it were not for, maybe my presence, I think my parents could have easily been taken. It's just that this is an interesting story. It's not a sexy story. It's, lies and sex and videotape doesn't apply here. This is a story about elderly people, so it's not as exciting as most of the elderly people end up passing away before they even end up in court, so we don't have any witnesses. The guardians become multi-millionaires with the complete cooperation of the court. And the only thing that I've done, I think, which has really brought this to a head, is I mention names. I'm not afraid to mention names. I'll mention Jared Schaefer, April Parks, Patience Bristol, who's in prison. Any of the names of these people who do this, I will mention freely. And I'm sitting here. If they want to do something about it, please do something about it. I'm not going to shut up.
That's very admirable. Steve, you're a very interesting guest because, people need to hear this. They need to know what's going on in our world. There's so many tragedies and so many horrible things going on, but this story, remember, baby boomers are the majority of the people living all over the world, and they're going to get old. They're going to be very soon in their 70s and their 80s and their 90s, and people are living to 100 or more. So I think it's great that you've revealed what's going on in Las Vegas, and hopefully it'll have an impact on other states. So, Steve Miller, I want to thank you for being on the Susan Brender Show, and it's been a pleasure, and I hope that all the things that you said give you the persistence and the perseverance to continue to sort of give a campaign for helping people. So
Susan, may I make one final statement on your show? If you're listening to this program and you're considering moving to one of these beautiful Sun Belt retirement communities, don't. Just stay home until we get this matter resolved. Do not move away from your loved ones. Do not move out of state. Stay home.
Wow. Now, if Steve, if people want to listen to you or they want to read some of your articles, what do they do?
Well, just go to AmericanMafia.com, Inside Vegas by Steve Miller, and you'll see dozens and dozens of articles about guardianship abuse. Or just buy the book, Guardianship by M. Larson, and a lot of my stories are there. And I'm sure you'll hear more about it in the future because this story is starting to gain wings around the United States.
Thank you very much, Steve Miller, for being again on the Susan Brender Show. And if you have more to say, I'd love to have you back. So it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Susan. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.